Spoke to Mr. Ninow. He maintains his version of the story, but I am working with what the court found, which is that it was planned.
These are live pictures coming to you from court where we are hearing evidence being given in mitigation of sentence in the ongoing trial of Nicholas Ninow, of course, is a convicted child rapist. The clinical psychologist has been giving evidence for a couple of hours now today already, and she's being cross-examined there in some detail. We'll continue to keep an eye on developments there. After we also earlier heard from Ninow himself, we repeatedly said that all of this is not about him, it should be about the little girl. He claimed earlier that he understood what that little girl is going through because he himself was a victim of abuse, and the psychologist speaking about his psychological state of mind as a result of his troubled childhood and the influence there of his mother. She testifying there that in as much as his grandmother was a positive influence on him during his life, it's when his mother re-entered his life that he started using drugs, and we saw a change in his behavior. For reaction on this ongoing story, we're joined by the Teddy Bear Foundation, or the Teddy Bear Clinic Foundation, Shahida Omar. Shahida, thank you so much always for your willingness to come and speak to us about this story and, unfortunately, many others. This has made for very difficult listening and viewing today. We finally heard from Nicholas Ninow himself. He's already been convicted, and now in mitigation of sentence we're hearing from the psychologist who's obviously spent a lot of time with him in investigating his childhood and how he's ended up being what many now deem him to be, a monster. What have you made of what you found out about one Nicholas Ninow today?
So, the first thing that came to my mind is that little child, the 7-year-old, a powerless, defenseless, helpless little child. So he did not have access to an adult. He resorted to something so helpless that could do nothing to stop it or protect herself. That is unacceptable. That heinous crime cannot be justified. Using the justification of substance abuse or drugs, where he resorted to drugs, so therefore he was not compos mentis, or not in a position to make an informed decision. Again, that's the typical modus operandi of pedophiles, of sexual predators or opportunistic predators, where there's denial of awareness.
Denial of awareness was the one thing. The psychologist also speaking that in her knowledge of somebody with Nicholas Ninow's state of mind, he has no respect for other people's rights. He's always in conflict with the law, as people like him usually are. And for me, quite importantly, she said, people with his kind of background have no empathy with the victim. Is this something that you've come across in the work that you've done?
Indeed, there's lack of empathy, lack of impulse control, unable to, delay or defer their gratification. It's all about the here and now. It's quite egocentric, narcissistic, and there's no value or regard for anybody besides themselves. It's all about themselves, me, myself, and I. And I think this is typical of what we are seeing here. So the fact that writing a poem and speaking and saying, it's all about the victim. Really? I think the important question here to ask is that, once again, justifying, because what Nicholas Ninow is showing that he was not in control of the situation, apportioning blame to everything else out there. And I think this is what we need to take cognizance of, that it's all very contrived. It's rehearsed and orchestrated, and it's done and demonstrated absolutely beautiful.
You speak about it seeming orchestrated and rehearsed. The psychologist earlier is saying that from what she understands of what happened, this wasn't planned in advance. But looking at his performance here today, in your opinion, is this somebody who would have been able to plan something like this in advance? Although it's a bit difficult, I suppose, for you to answer if you haven't spoken to him yourself.
Yes, one can speculate that what was he doing there? Why did he find himself moving from one chair to another chair to have easy access and availability and full vision of the child. So I think one cannot doubt that there wasn't some element of premeditation, because if there wasn't premeditation, he would not do what he did.
Statistics that we've heard today and that we've heard before in dealing with these kinds of horrific stories is that adults who have themselves been abused as children, there is a percentage of them that more often than not will end up abusing other children. It's a very sad statistic. Have you had dealings with that kind of trend? The question to the psychologist at the time was, why is it that some victims of similar circumstances, like Nicholas Ninow, end up being aggressive adults who do acts like this and others don't?
So yes, there's a strong probability in the trajectory of victim becoming victimizer, but as you've so beautifully articulated, there are many victims out there who have not become victimizers, and given his context of receiving support and being provided opportunities for interventions in terms of rehabilitation, etc., one cannot justify.
What are you hoping to see from the court once it's come to its decision on how to sentence Nicholas Ninow?
Well, there's no other option but life sentence and no opportunities for parole. And I think what we want to see is this victim healing and moving on in her life, being able to move on. I think that's the most important thing, the well-being of this innocent child who has been subjected to a horrific crime that no child should be subjected to.
Shada Omar, thank you so much from the Teddy Bear Clinic Foundation. Thank you for your insight today.